Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, the day after, or 2 days after, we see a semi-trailer, as we call it in the United States, in Britain they call it an articulated lorry. After we see that used to attack people, now we see the EU wanting to ban semi-automatic guns. Because, it was a semi-trailer that was used, I guess. I don't know what they're thinking, but we do know what they're thinking, don't we? We know that they want to use the Islamic terror that they're bringing in amongst us to take away our freedoms, to create emergencies, and now we see the results of this on Infowars.com. We have an article, EU pushes gun control in response to Islamic terrorism in Europe. The 28 members of the European Union have reached a preliminary agreement to implement a near-total ban on semi-automatic firearms, claiming it is a necessary step to reduce the likelihood of terror attacks. Maybe they should ban the terrorists from coming in rather than the guns, because they're not going to be able to keep it out of their hands. I point out the European Commission announced a political agreement between the European Parliament and 28 member states of the European Union to tighten already stringent gun control laws by banning high-capacity firearms. And again, we see the same thing being done again and again by the types of jurisdictions like we have here in America and Chicago and New York, where they have the highest gun crime in Chicago, and yet they think they can solve it by adding more prohibitions for guns. No, it doesn't work to prohibit guns any more than it stops people from getting to drugs by creating drug prohibition. The left and the right need to come together and understand the futility of prohibition. They say this includes a ban on, of course, automatic firearms that are converted into semi-automatic firearms and other things. But listen to the other parts of the agreement here. They're going to ban the regulation. They're going to regulate alarm and acoustic weapons. So I guess you're not going to be able to have an alarm that you can pull out of your purse to get people to turn around and look and hopefully help you with their bare hands. Maybe they're going to ban pepper spray as well. I don't know. Keep you completely defenseless, because if they're going to ban the principle of self-defense, then this is where it's going to end up. They say they're also going to regulate deactivated weapons. So if the weapon can't even fire, they're going to take it away. See, this is a cultural move. They want people to be afraid of guns. They want guns to be totally alien to people. They don't even want you to see them in a historical deactivated process. And they're going to, of course, exchange information between member states. This has been developing for a long time. This is the UN agenda. Remember, the United Nations created the War on Drugs agenda, the 4 schedules, and put all the drugs into those schedules in 1961, 10 years before Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs, and just copied all of their agenda, all of their regulations. And this is what this is about. Going back to 2012, of course, we had the UN Arms Trade Treaty. They were trying to push that through, especially because the United States was reluctant to do it. The rest of the world was happy to go along with that. That was going to give them increased powers to track us, to track our possession and transfer of guns. They laid the groundwork for this with Fast and Furious. That was what was supposed to get public opinion moving in that direction. And of course, it blew up in their face when an agent of the government was killed. We found out that it was a false flag, but that was supposed to lay the groundwork for the UN Arms Trade Treaty back in 2012. They have not given up on that agenda. And we need to understand as we look at this, and we're going to look at this terror attack, what is really going on here is we have self-loathing, suicidal white liberals who cannot wait to just eradicate themselves. And many of these people, and Germany is a good example, it began there because of their rightful guilt about the Nazis, but they did the wrong thing. What they should have done is they should have repudiated the Nazis. Instead, what they have done is embrace Nazi policies. You think I'm kidding? Adolf Hitler, the first thing he did was to ban private firearms because he didn't want any opposition to his goons in the streets. He didn't want people to be able to protect themselves from the Nazis. And of course, as we saw in the Warsaw Ghetto, just one person with a hammer getting a pistol from the Nazis. And then it spread from there. They started taking the guns from the Nazis who had surrounded them. And they tied down a panzer division, or maybe more than a panzer division, for a very long time until they burned the entire city down. So anybody that says that you can't resist tyranny with a pistol or with a hammer, they need to go back and look at the Warsaw Resistance. And they need to go back and look at Adolf Hitler. They need to repudiate Nazism instead of standing with it. And that's what the European Union is doing now. But of course, the European Union has become the fulfillment of Adolf Hitler's dream of a German-dominated Europe. And this is what we're seeing now. We got the European Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker, saying, of course, we would have liked to have gone further with gun bans, but I'm confident that the current agreement represents a milestone in gun control of the EU. No, it's just redundant to what they've already done. He said this agreement provides for tighter controls, which will help prevent the acquisition of firearms by terrorists. Well, why not, as I said before, have tighter controls on terrorists coming in? You have no way to vet these people. And we look at the absolute total ineffectiveness of the German police. These people look like Keystone cops. And as I pointed out yesterday in the report that I filed, if you go back to the 1972 Munich Olympics, where you had Islamic terrorists capture the Israeli team there, held them hostage for 20 hours. The Germans tried to negotiate something. They thought they had a deal. Eventually, all the hostages were killed, but not before they tortured them. And the German government held that information secret, held it from the public to protect their incompetence. They held it for 43 years. It only came out last year. Of course, that was back in 1972 that it happened. And the tragedy, as we're going to see in this next story, is the personal tragedy that's behind this kind of government incompetence. As the widow of the weightlifter who was castrated in front of the other hostages and then killed, said when she saw the pictures finally in 2015, she said it erased the memory that she had of her husband. She said all I remembered of him was his smiling face and dimples, and now I can't see anything but that last picture that I saw of him. And as they point out in this article, and this is a quote from a minister, an expert in Europe. He says, if a radicalized fanatic decides to use a truck as a weapon, you don't stand a chance unless you know about him and about his plans in advance, and you arrest him before he can act. Or maybe you keep him out of the country to start with. See, they're trying to lay the groundwork for a police state. And that's what we all, as libertarians, need to push back is equally as hard against that. We do not want a police state. We're going to talk about that later in the broadcast as well. But he's saying if he wants to use a truck, you're not going to be able to stop him. He says it's impossible to check all vehicles in the EU or to seal off all Christmas markets to protect them from any danger. Don't worry. They're going to try both of those things. They're very busy on their plans to ban private ownership and human drivers of cars. And they are long down that road. And that's the next argument they're going to give us. That's another part of why you're seeing these types of terrorist events happening with big semi-trailers. Now, I want to take a look at this. We talked about this earlier on the day. I came on the Alex Jones show, and Alex and I talked about this. This incredibly disturbing, sad film of a jihadi mom who has been totally brainwashed into this death cult. She has herself dressed all in black as the angel of death, or as the Grim Reaper. And she is kissing her 7- and 9-year-old daughters goodbye. And this surfaced after there was a 7-year-old girl who went into a Syrian police station. We reported on this yesterday. Went into a Syrian police station and had a suicide vest on, and it was detonated by remote control. So somebody in this sick cult of death, which is Islam, sends this little girl into the police station and then detonates that. And this is the mother, so proud to send her 7- and 9-year-old daughters off to be killed and to kill other people. So that's what they're proud of. And as I looked at this, and I talked to Alex earlier today, I said, you look at it. Why is it that the left loves Islam so much? The left that says that they're for women, that they're for LGBT, that they are for all these other issues that they want to protect. And yet, these are the people for the children. They want to protect the children. They're always telling us they're going to do regulations to protect the children. That's why we have to surrender our freedoms, right? And yet, they support this group. And as I was thinking about it during the day, I thought about the time we went to the abortion clinic here to protest, the time my wife was there. And she got that guy on camera. And he said, I kill my kids. And I thought, that's it. That's the common ground that the authoritarian left has with Islam. They kill their kids, and they use them to kill your kids. It is a sick cult of death. And I'm not just talking about Islam, but I'm talking about the sick Democrats who support them as well. And I want to take a look at MSNBC's Chris Hayes and how he tried to push back and criticize Donald Trump for telling it like it is. Here's a clip of Chris Hayes.
Investigators have yet to determine whether it was a deliberate attack, much less whether it was terrorism.
Oh, they don't know if it, hold it right there, hold it right there. They don't know if it was deliberate. The guy takes, okay, witnesses immediately said, and I had people push back on Twitter against me for saying this, it's Islamic terrorism. Yeah, we know it is. It's a copycat of the French attack. And they don't know if it was deliberate. He drove 40 miles an hour for a sustained period of time through 100 people. 12 of them are dead already. But we don't know, says Chris Hayes, fake news, MSNBC, if it was deliberate or not. But let's listen to the rest of the lies from this guy who is Rachel Maddow's doppelganger. Let's go back to Chris Hayes.
In attacks on public places, and ISIS claimed responsibility for one such attack over the summer in Nice, France, where a truck barreled through crowds celebrating Bastille Day.
Okay, hold it right there. Hold it right there. Yeah. See, we don't know. ISIS claimed credit for that, but as Chris Hayes says, we don't know that that was Islam. Who else in the world takes pride in the massacre of innocent people because they're a different religion than you? No one other than Islam. Let's go back to his lies here.
People. Trump responded to what happened today in a statement. Our hearts and prayers are with the loved ones of the victims of today's horrifying terror attack in Berlin. Innocent civilians were murdered in the streets as they prepared to celebrate the Christmas holiday. ISIS and other Islamist terrorists continually slaughter Christians in their communities and places of worship as part of their global jihad. Just to reiterate, the deadly incident has not been declared a terrorist attack by the German authorities themselves as of yet.
Hold it right there. Hold it right there. Yeah, unless the government pronounces it a terrorism attack, do not use your mind and your reason and your senses to understand what's going on here, okay? And Donald Trump is a bad guy for telling you that. That is absolutely amazing. The rest of that clip, and we're not going to play it, he goes in and he shows the assassination in Turkey, same day. Again, the religion as a death cult. And remember, when you talk about gun control, where we started this whole broadcast, talking about the European Union saying they're going to step up gun control, who was the individual who shot the Russian ambassador in Istanbul? It was a Turkish policeman who was trained as part of their special forces. See, you cannot give all of the guns to the government. They, first of all, if they're good guys, they can't be everywhere. They can't be everywhere and stop everything. And going back to that situation in the French Riviera, they stopped that terrorist attack by a policeman who was there, a policewoman actually, who shot that driver and stopped him, killed him. That's how they stopped it. A good person with a gun. And there weren't any good people with guns in Germany. And so they had some people who said they witnessed this person who was arrested getting out of the cab and running away. They filmed him with their camera. They called with their phone. They called the police. He was subsequently arrested. And then the prosecutors and the police chief, the authorities came in and said, well, we don't think he's the right guy. Maybe he's not. I don't know. Nevertheless, when we look at the history of the German government, when we look at the lies that have been told to us by the establishment press, I have my doubts as to whether or not they maybe there were other people involved. But let's take a look at what happened just in the last week in the Netherlands. Geert Wilders was found guilty of insulting a group after a hate speech trial. And I want to tell you what he did. Now, this is the way CNN reports it, the fake news CNN. They say the Dutch far-right opposition leader. Well, I don't know that he's far-right. I know that they label everybody that is not part of the authoritarian, open-border, globalist left as far-right to them. But Geert Wilders, they say, was convicted of inciting discrimination and insulting a group after a trial over statements he made about Moroccans. What did he say? As part of a political speech about immigration policy, he asked his audience, do you want more or less Moroccans in this city and in the Netherlands? And the audience repeatedly chanted less. The court said that Wilders singled out an entire group of citizens and that the message came through loud and clear. It convicted him of insulting a group and incitement to discrimination. Well, there's a message that came out loud and clear from the Dutch government, and that is that they are opposed to free speech. They support authoritarian censorship. That's the message that we get from them. And he points out it was politically motivated. He said the PVV-hating judges, that's his political party, said they hate us, just declared Moroccans a race and convicted me as well as half of the Dutch population. He has previously called Islamic immigration an invasion. Exactly right. Exactly right. He said it is an invasion that will replace our people and erase our culture. He spoke the truth to power, and they're punishing him. They didn't actually do any punishment to him, but they convicted him to put that out there. And then they said, well, we'll stay the punishment. He also said this. He said, worldwide, a movement has started that is making short shrift of the politically correct doctrines of the elite and their subordinate media, like Chris Hayes, MSNBC, CNN, et cetera, et cetera. He said, Brexit proved it. The American election proved it. He said, neither he nor his supporters were racist. He said, they are people who want their country back and who are sick and tired of not being listened to. That is precisely what is going on. And as we look at this article here from the one final article, as we're about out of time. Today, the Mexican ambassador urged immigrants to apply for U.S. citizenship. Now, think about this. We call them, they want to be called undocumented workers. I say, instead of illegal alien, let's call them what they are. Foreign citizens who are here illegally. These are citizens of Mexico. The Mexican ambassador is telling them, do this to remain in the United States. He said that he's urging more Mexican citizens. This is the way the Hill reports it. Foreign citizens here illegally, the Mexican ambassador, and an act of war, quite frankly, is urging them to apply for U.S. citizenship ahead of the Trump administration. He says one of the very important protection actions to become citizens, because then they're no longer subject to deportation processes. On the other hand, they still don't lose their Mexican citizenship.
In case you haven't heard, Infowars has become the most influential media outlet in America. We're making freedom go viral. And now we are proud to announce a new weapon in the epic battle against the globalists. Infowars Prime, where you can watch live high-definition feeds of The Alex Jones Show, plus exclusive insider videos from the Infowars crew and behind-the-scenes action. Go to Infowars.com/app and download today. Infowars Prime is available right now for your iPhone or Android. You will have access to exclusive videos that you can't see anywhere else. And that means live coverage of events and breaking news on location as it happens. You can also take advantage of amazing deals from the Infowars store that are only available for Infowars Prime subscribers. That's Infowars Prime at Infowars.com/app. And if you can hear my voice, you are the resistance.